Welcome back, Mzazi. It is Deaf Awareness Month, so of course we are talking about something very important. We're talking about hearing loss, and we need to find out what it is that we can do to ensure that the millions of people all over the world with hearing loss, how they can look after their hearings and what support there is out there for them.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, it's obviously important, right? This is something that affects millions worldwide. And this morning, we're going to be fortunate enough to have two distinguished experts with us to help unravel the complexities of this condition, I think. And just another shout out to Laseka over here, absolutely owning it here on the throne with me. I'm so grateful to have you for these conversations. But let's talk about our other two special guests. We've got Dr. Winile Makaye. She's an experienced ENT specialist, as well as Talia Lifson, a skilled audiologist. Now, they're here to discuss the different types of hearing loss, the potential treatments, and how untreated hearing issues can impact not only communication, but I think overall health. And this is something important. Good morning. How are we doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good,
Guys.
Good to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm definitely keen to get educated, yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Now, we really want to know, what are the different types of hearing loss?
So it really depends on where in the audiological pathway the breakdown is happening. The audiological pathway is a lot more involved than a lot of people realize. There's the detection part, which is the actual ear that you see, and the cochlea, the snail shell looking thing that you often see pictures of. And then there's the brain that has to interpret the signals as well. So depending on where the breakdown is happening, you get different forms of hearing loss, ranging from a conductive hearing loss, which is basically when you have a breakdown of the structural components in the middle ear, preventing the sound from reaching the cochlea to its full capacity. Then you get a sensory neural hearing loss, which is where the actual hearing organ, the cochlea, is no longer interpreting or detecting sounds correctly. And then you get a bit of a mixture where you have problems in a few different areas, causing a few problems along the pathway. And then you get a type of hearing condition that's quite unknown actually at the moment, is an auditory processing disorder, where the ear itself is actually functioning 100% normally, but for some reason the brain is unable to interpret the signal correctly.
Oh, whoa.
So yeah, that's quite a big one as well that often gets overseen.
And this sounds so overwhelming, because I can't help but put myself in the situation and feel like, wow, what an important sense that's just taken away. That's a part of such a big experience here. But again, it's so incredible that there are these solutions. I want to know, when it comes to solutions though, Doc, okay, is there a cure? Is there a solution to something like this in terms of these issues we're talking about?
Well, Ryan, it really depends, as Tyler has said, on the type of hearing loss, the degree of hearing loss, and the cause, and whether it's on an adult or a child. For instance, I like to use this little illustration with my patients as well.
Oh, yes, please. Educate.
So this is basically a cross-sectional picture of the ear. So we tend to divide it into three parts for function and also anatomically. Yeah. So this is the external ear. This is, I'll just mention the parts that are important. That's the pinna. That's the external auditory canal, and then so that's the external part. Then the middle ear is where you have your eardrum, your little bones that transmit sound, which we call ossicles, and then this is the inner ear, which houses both the cochlea, which is for hearing, and the semicircular canals, which are for balance, and then you get the eighth nerve, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve, for both balance and hearing. So in terms of, yes, some conditions can be cured. For instance, if you've got some wax infection, or in children, you've got foreign bodies, you can have a mild degree of hearing loss, which is curable once you correct that. Also, children tend to get a lot of otitis media with diffusion, which basically has to do with just physiologically their ears has not developed fully yet. And this little tube here, actually, interestingly, we call it the eustachian tube. It connects the back of the nose to the middle ear, and it helps the middle ear to ventilate.
That's crazy.
And in children, because it's still developing, they therefore get a lot of fluid, and then they get a bit of mild to moderate intermittent hearing loss, which is generally resolved on its own, but sometimes we need to intervene if it tends to infection, and then we need to put grommets for those children. Okay. Now, in terms of the inner ear, that's where you get actually sensorineural hearing loss, which is generally the part of hearing that is not curable, number one. And really, just as a way of an example, a low-hanging fruit when it comes to sensorineural hearing loss that is permanent but preventable is something that we all do. You know, we are all always connected on our earphones, blasting music. Yeah. And actually, the World Health Organization has cited that in about 20 years' time, more than 1 billion of the young adults will suffer from noise-induced hearing loss because of these dangerous listening
I
levels
can
that we
imagine.
expose ourselves
Whoa.
to. Yeah.
Dr. Makai, you know, this is very interesting, and you've both mentioned cochlear implants as well as children. I know that people who use the social model, such as myself, we generally tend to believe that people who are experiencing hearing loss should rather learn sign language, whereas the medical model would say, no, you can go, you can get your cochlear, you can get your hearing aid and so forth. In terms of kids, is it perhaps dangerous? Because I know that a lot of the social model people believe that it's too dangerous for the babies to get the cochlear implants.
It is.
So is it a myth that you can bust for us quickly?
Well, Lesego, thank you for that. But just quickly, language development is very important.
Yes.
And when you speak about language, it's not only spoken language. So it could be signing, it could be spoken language, or it could even be lip reading. So children, it's very important for them to get a level of language development, because generally these are kids that have a type of hearing loss that we call sensorineural as well. And most of it usually develops, we call it prelingual, which means it develops sometimes in utero before they are born. So if they are detected early, then we can intervene early, and things like cochlear implant are great in that regard.
And just like that, a myth was busted.
Yeah,
Thank you
I'm
so
here for
much.
this, and it doesn't stop
Yeah.
there, Mzansi. Pardon me. We are going to carry on this conversation. I'm getting absolutely educated here, getting schooled right now, and I'm here for it. I hope you are too, because we're going to dive into part 2 of this discussion in just a bit. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to get educated on, then don't worry. We've got the experts here to help you out as well, so you can come through on our WhatsApp line, 063-408-8863, or otherwise, carry on sticking around, because the magic will continue.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Yes, Mzansi, welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show, opening up on S3 and opening you up to incredible conversation. And hey now, look who's this, our guest presenter for the day, Lesego Science, is here joining us, helping us dive into this incredible world right now. And in our continued discussion on hearing loss during Deaf Awareness Month, which is happening right now, we turn our attention to the causes, the signs, and the importance of early detection, and that's particularly in children. Now, we are still with Dr. Wenile Makaye as well as Talia Lifson, who are our esteemed panel, giving us all the education that we came for. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You've got to tell us, because earlier we touched on children and the cochlear implants and all of that. What is the importance of early detection of hearing loss?
So I'll take this one quickly. Early detection is very important, Lesego. I would just, the Center for Disease Control, for instance, they have a strategy for early detection of hearing loss. So they speak of something they call a benchmark, which is 1, 3, and 6. Okay. So they look at any child that's born within the first month of life, they need to have had some screening for hearing loss. If that is referred, which generally would be almost like a failed hearing screening test, then by the age of 3 months, they need to have had a more diagnostic testing, which is more of a full battery that might be able to identify the specific cause of the hearing loss, and by the age of 6 months they need to have some level of intervention. Now, this might not be practical for low to middle income country like South Africa and Africa in general, but at the very least what we can aim to do is to screen 100% of the kids that are at risk. Now, there's the kids that are born premature, there's the kids that are born to parents who have hearing loss, there's the kids that are admitted to the neonatal ICU, and these are those kids that sometimes may be born with certain infections from their mothers. But fortunately, because of the strategies of prevention, actually, which are very important, things like good antenatal care for mother and child can pick up these infections and treat them beforehand so that we can prevent these kind of complications. But definitely, early detection is very important in terms of prevention.
Exactly.
So you talk about early detection. I get that box is ticked. What else are we able to possibly do when it comes to prevention? And what are some of the actual, let's say, causes that are a part of hearing loss? Because as we mentioned earlier, we briefly touched on it, but it seems like there's so much that can get affected. There's so many ways you can get affected. Are some of them preventable?
Yeah, so there's a number of different causes of hearing loss. You can be born with a hearing loss, obviously, and we touched on a few other options there. And obviously the noise-induced hearing loss is a big one as well.
Gen
but-
Z, listen up.
Yeah, but there are quite a few causes of hearing loss that people aren't that aware of. For example, a lot of medications, their side effects are hearing loss and tinnitus as well, which is the ringing, buzzing sound that you hear in your ears. And certain illnesses that can result in tinnitus and hearing loss. I know that there were a few people that came to us after having COVID with hearing problems. And then obviously things like trauma to the head, you can, if you have a bad fall or a knock or something like that, that can cause problems. History of chronic ear infections, if you don't get them treated, can cause permanent damage actually to some of the pathway if left, unmanaged. So yeah, there's quite a few different, anything else there that I missed, but I think
you've touched on
I've touched on most of them. There's quite a few different reasons. Yeah.
I've always been curious about something, right? Hearing loss and the ability to speak, to be verbal. How is that connected? Because being in the deaf community myself, I know there are people with hearing loss that can actually speak, and then there are others that can't make sounds. So what is the distinguish there? How is there?
Is there a connection?
Is there a connection?
Yes.
A difference? Yeah.
So when a baby is actually still in the belly, their ears start to develop and they're exposed to different sounds. And then obviously when they're born, they get exposed to a lot of different sounds. And in order for a person to develop spoken language, they need to be able to hear what they're producing, or at least find another method of being able to monitor what they're producing. So either through vibrations, some people don't necessarily need to be able to hear to be able to talk. So they need to be able to know what mouth formations to create and how to voice those sounds, as well as feeling the vibrations in terms of what pitches of sound that they're using. So it's quite a complex thing. Just because you're born deaf doesn't mean you can't learn how to speak verbally. And then some people who are born deaf, it's quite important for them to remain deaf because it's seen as not disabled but differently abled. And then you get some communities where they say, no, we're going to look at cochlear implants and we're going to learn verbal or spoken language. It just depends on your community that you're brought up in and what your beliefs are in terms of how you would like to communicate in the world, because obviously it does limit you if you aren't able to communicate with the general population.
I can just sit here and think about and imagine the frustration and the challenge that must come with just trying to pronounce a simple word. If you don't have the reception of like hearing the sound, how do you know you're getting it right or not?
Yes.
It's absolutely crazy, and it just, I think, adds to the amount of work that goes into what you both are doing. So again, thank you for showing up, I think, and for being a part of what I think is something incredible, allowing that possibility to really just materialize. And I think we all deserve that. I think we've spoken about a lot of things here that might highlight a lot in South Africa right now. We've spoken about things that we maybe can and can't control. For the things that we can control, and I know a lot of us that might be now aware of the fact that, hey, we might be potentially suffering some hearing loss or going down that road. What should one do in that position? For those that can prevent it, what's the best advice that you have for them?
I would say just monitoring the hearing is very important, because the brain is a remarkable organ. It adapts to any environment that it's put in front of it. Over time, it will figure out how to achieve things within that environment. So the more you monitor your hearing, the earlier you can pick up whether or not there's an actual problem, because as your hearing changes over time, so your brain adapts. So not everyone is actively fully aware of how much they're hearing or not hearing. When you look at something, if you've got visual problems, you can see, okay, it's blurry.
Yes.
When you're hearing stuff, you either hear it and you're aware of it, or you don't. So the brain gets very used to hearing in the way, and that's why you often find family members or friends sort of pushing people to go get their hearing tested, because the person themselves isn't necessarily aware, but the people around them are like, you need to go get something checked out.
Repeating myself 10 times.
So monitoring the hearing is very important. Listen to your family and friends. There's no harm in getting a baseline hearing test done.
And
You
there's
don't
no
have to
shame
do
in it
anything
either,
about it.
of
If you
course.
find a hearing loss or you don't find a hearing loss, at least we have something later on to compare and reference back to. So just testing, test. And if you ask, if someone asks you a question and you answer with full conviction, knowing 100% what they asked you, and then you get a sort of this kind of a look back at them, back at you, you should probably go get your hearing test.
That's a red flag.
And you know, guys, just to add on to that, also, interestingly, there is actually an app that's been developed by the WHO in collaboration with the University of Pretoria. So this is right here at home.
Yeah.
Is called Hear Who. So it's the letter, the word here, and then WHO, the capital letters. So basically, this you can actually download on your phone, or they even have a web. And you can screen your hearing. You know, it's very simple and straightforward, gives you simple instructions, and then you can screen your hearing. And also just in terms of, to go back to the low-hanging fruit of noise-induced hearing loss that we are all exposing ourselves to nowadays, the recommendation is that you need to keep your volume at least at 60% of the maximum. If you're in a noisy environment at groove, so it's called.
Move away from the
away from the
speakers. Thank you so much for those
Every hour you
yeah?
must go outside and at least give your cochlea a chance to recover for about 10 minutes.
Yes.
And also, just as a brief way of knowing if you're in a noisy environment, if someone is at like a arm's length from you and you speak to them at conversational level and they can't hear you, you know there's a problem.
Those are wonderful tips.
Wow,
hey.
definitely.
Stop playing your music so loud in the shower. Those speakers, doof, doof,
I'm going to
doof.
sell myself in the
It's
car.
today.
Well, yeah, Dr. Talia, sorry, and Dr. Makaya, thank you so much again for sharing your morning with us, for educating us and Mzansi. And I think this conversation should definitely echo on for the rest of the month. So appreciate you, and we definitely appreciate you as well, Mzansi. Don't go anywhere, of course. We're still going to be diving into some more incredibleness, great conversations. We've got Jabbar, as we heard. We are very excited about. We'll be having in that conversation. And then, yes, a little bit later, we'll also dive into some kitchen stuff. But you don't need to go anywhere. These good convos are carrying on in just a bit.
Only you can make my